this topic. One of the things that I shared with a couple folks is that when I was privileged to be the CEO for 1517 Media, we started using design thinking for trying to figure out how to truly serve our curricula customers, in particular, Sunday school teachers, Sunday school Christian ed directors, and ultimately those they serve, the children, youth, and adults who were taking their faith formation classes. And while it was a lot of effort, we found that it really helped refine the products that we were creating so that they truly met the needs of both the teachers and the administrators, as well as those who were taking the classes. Last fall, Laura Alden was kind enough to invite me to join in several strategic thinking sessions for Judson Press. And we talked a lot about innovation and how to serve the church as it's changed and changing. And Lauren Ng, one of our speakers today, was also in that group of folks thinking about innovation on behalf of Judson Press. And as she started talking about design thinking in the church, I was like, yes, yes, yes. I'm so excited somebody else gets this. So we reached out to one another and connected, and I invited her to do this Third Thursday webinar. She drafted her friend and colleague, John Park, and here we are today. Just a quick little bit of background. Lauren is the Director of Leadership Empowerment at the American Baptist Home Mission Societies, which is also the parent organization, if you will, for Judson Press. And she works with missional entrepreneurs and creators to pursue innovative ideas for ministry. She holds degrees from Oberlin College and the Berkeley School of Theology, and is currently pursuing a Doctor of Ministry degree from Central Baptist Theological Seminary. And that leads into her connection with John Park, who is at Central Baptist Theological Seminary, where he's the director of the Doctor of Ministry program and the DePere Chair of Congregational Health. He has his doctorate in leadership studies, organizational leadership, and has worked with diverse ethnic and linguistic groups, both at home and in cross-cultural settings. Lauren, John, welcome. We're delighted and honored that you're with us. And now I will turn it to you.
Thank you so much for those lovely introductions, Beth. This is a really fun group for me to be with. As Beth already mentioned, she and I have geeked out about design thinking and human-centered design. And she also mentioned that Laura Alden and Gail Toll, who I see is on the call, are colleagues of mine. And not only do I know John Park through my DMin program, but he is actually my current professor, but he has promised me he is not going to be grading me on this presentation. So this sits squarely outside of our curriculum. And I'm so excited to meet all of you. I've heard a lot about you from Beth and Laura. And, you know, little known fact, when I was at Oberlin College, I was a creative writing and English double major and thought I would be entering your world. I was really wanting to be a published poet. And then felt the call to ministry, but I'm deciding that at some point I want to be among all you. Maybe I get to crash one of your annual meetings or something like that, because I just like to have dinner with y'all and talk about everything that has to do with literature and publishing. So we're very excited to be here. We are going to get started with an informal poll. Some of you may have done those polls on Zoom. We're not going to mess with all the admin required for that. So what we're going to do is on your bottom right-hand corner, you've got reactions. Some of you may have used those. They're little emojis. I'm going to ask you 2 questions. And after I ask the question, I'd like you to just give me a heart or a thumbs up or the party hat or something like that, if this is something that you agree with. And feel free to answer in the chat as well. We're big on using the chat function. So if there's something else you want to say, go ahead and do that. And I know that Beth can share both the recording and the chat thread following the meeting. Okay, so the first question in the poll: do you have a working definition of what design thinking might be? And if the answer is yes, do a thumbs up, a clap, a heart, party hat, anything you want. Do you have a working definition of what design thinking might be? Okay, Mm, oh, we even got some people using the no. That's like next level. Okay, great. So this is good. This is going to be a lot of fun to kind of get started together. Okay, here's the next question. Do you feel you have been given room or space to pursue innovation in your work and in your publishing ministry? Do you feel like you've been given the room or the space to pursue innovation? Okay, got some party hats, some claps. Okay. So it looks like for the most part, the majority of you have felt that that's been the case, which is great. And there's a couple who maybe not so much. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some ideas during this presentation on how you can kind of move yourself and your colleagues towards innovative space. So I'm going to pass it to John, who's going to share a quick video to kind of give you a beginning understanding of what we mean when we say design thinking, and we'll go from there.
And this video shows you an idea of what design thinking is about, but it doesn't really capture the whole process. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. So let me share my screen.
We talk about what does it mean to have a lantern like this is the little sun. So what does it actually do? Well, it both obviously becomes about doing your homework and getting things done practically, and this is very important because it replaces petroleum and kerosene, and you don't have the fumes up into your face, and it's a lot cheaper too. Basically, the sun is energy raining down every day. We just need to pick it up. So the solar panel, right, this little black thing here, you just need to hold it out, and in that way you can harvest energy. And that I think is great because I know that in the evening when I'm in the darkness and I have the power that I harvested myself, I become my own power station. I have always worked with light, and I had traveled a bit in East Africa, Ethiopia in particular, and that is how I come to see that some people actually live without any access to light, without access to energy actually. And I realized, well, maybe I can use the knowledge I have about light to see if I could create an opportunity to create light in places like rural Africa. Basically, it's a solar panel, an LED, and on the inside, there's a rechargeable battery. I then try to design it so that it comes across as a positive, something that people want to have, something that is emotional. And how we at Little Sun distribute it is to either work through social business, but also sometimes we are unable to reach the very rural areas, just like the project we just did in Rwanda. And then we bring it to the absolutely most vulnerable children who does not have otherwise any access to power. For me, art has to do with examining your relationship with the world, maybe with yourself. So looking at art is really an opportunity to sort of reevaluate, well, how do I see reality? And in that sense, the Little Sun project also has to do with this idea of seeing things different. So there is that idea that, well, energy is about changing your life and taking charge of your own life. Understanding what does access to light or access to energy mean might actually be worth a little examination. So why don't you try when home at night to turn off all the light and then think of the important homework you have to do for tomorrow. Then you can turn on a little kerosene lantern or get yourself an oil lamp out and put petroleum in it and turn it on, and then get that homework done for tomorrow. Hearing and reading and thinking about things is not the same as doing things. Little Sun, the whole idea of having light in your hand, like carrying it with you, is also about physical empowerment, where it's about actual being physical about what you want to do.
So what did you all think about this video? As a matter of fact, the Midwestern region recently experienced blackouts. And because of that, many people have lost their electricity even now, I think in some places like in Texas. So this light definitely means a lot to a lot of people, and also to those who lost their electricity. So I'd like to have a couple of participants respond to what you saw and what you thought of this video. Yes, Milton.
The way that it wasn't just that he built the lights, but the way the design followed, it needed to be portable. I mean, what he said about, I wrote it down, that art has to do with examining our relationship to the world. So
Yes.
it's figuring out how I refine that relationship. So I thought it was that was really challenging to me.
You have a great observational skill and you listened intently. And I think that great sign that you have good design thinking capability. So we'll get to that later. And anybody else? Just one more person.
I think it talked about embodying expression and art and what is important.
Yes, great. Right on. Thank you, Lauren, for your feedback. So now we're going to switch to Lauren. Lauren's going to talk about design thinking as a spiritual discipline. Lauren?
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen. Y'all able to see that? Okay, perfect. So we're going to take this presentation. We're going to do 2 parts so kind of what's coming up. We're going to first start thinking about design thinking as a spiritual practice, and then I'm going to pass it back to John, and he's going to talk about design thinking, the actual design thinking process. So the design thinking process, though, always does begin with a question, right? Or 2 or 3. The designer you just watched that video about started with a question, what is the problem I'm trying to solve here? And so we're anticipating you might be asking yourself some questions like, why should an association of Protestant church-owned publishers care about design thinking? What does this even have to do with our work and our faith? And how might I and then my organization be changed as a result of this presentation? So at the end of our time together, we're going to return to these 3 questions and welcome your responses. So just kind of keep those in mind as guiding questions. Okay. Since we're a group of Christian publishers, we're going to be good Sunday schoolers, and we're going to begin with a theological framework for what we're going to be discussing today. So I'm here to contend that design thinking can be seen as a spiritual practice. One of my favorite definitions of spiritual practices is that they are workouts that train the soul. And when we learn to see the world through the lens of design thinking, we train our souls to think, hopefully, transformationally, and incarnationally. I may have just made up a couple words, and I expect a group of publishers to tell me if I did or not, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Okay, so let's break that down. Design thinking is innately human-centered and holds as its basic assumption that all problems, even the most seemingly intractable problems like poverty, gender equality, equitable access to clean water, the decline of mainline denominations, that they're not only solvable, but that the answers to those problems will be found in the experiences of those who face those problems every day. So God invites us to co-create with God to address challenges, solve problems, and discern a path forward. And with the unending possibilities that come from God's divine power, we can remain a people of hope. Matthew 19:26, Jesus looked at them intently and said, humanly speaking, it is impossible, but with God, everything is indeed possible. Design thinking is also transformational. It is concerned with meeting human needs and solving complex social problems for the common good. However, its basic principles are scalable and therefore applicable to indefinite contexts. So Tim Brown, who is the chair of the design firm IDEO, who pioneered the practice of human-centered design, says, don't think of it as failure, think of it as designing experiments, one experiment after another, through which you are going to learn. And design thinking within a ministry context then, in our context as church-owned publishers, seeks the renewal of heart, mind, family, community, workplace, and industry. Again, always stating that the people affected are the experts and the best tour guides as we pursue a solution. God is continually moving among us, as we know, doing a new thing and leading us toward transformation. So design thinking is a tool that can help us process the movement of the Spirit. As the missional church practitioners would often say, God is up to something, right? And we need to discern what that is and the better future that God has for us. So God is doing something new, bringing out the good in all circumstances, and even out of chaos and hardship come new insights and new ways of doing things when we remember that the God of transformation is at the helm. For I am about to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not perceive it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. And finally, again, design thinking is incarnational. Missionary linguist Eugene Nida once said, good missionaries have always been good anthropologists. There's a guy named Tyler Priebe who wrote an MA thesis called Design Thinking for Missiology. And he writes, part of the critique of the business sector from design thinking is that the business sector is too removed and not sufficiently embodied with the people it exists to serve. Getting close to the people, being among the people, dwelling with the people, because we understand from a design thinking perspective, it is the people who have the answers to the problems that they face. God's incarnation in the person of Jesus was based on a certain proximate nearness to the people he came to serve and save, right? So design thinking encourages us to empathize with, understand, and invite others into the design process. Emmy Kalawale, editor in residence at the Stanford University D School, says, in order to get to new solutions, you have to get to know different people, different scenarios, and different places. Leviticus 26:12, I will walk among you. I will be your God, and you will be my people. And from John, the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. So again, design thinking as a spiritual practice helps us to remain hopeful in our work, to surrender ourselves to the transformational power of God, and to practice the incarnational presence of the divine with those whom we seek to serve. Just as we practice other spiritual disciplines regularly or even daily, right? Like prayer, meditation, fasting, self-care, so is design thinking a lens through which one can daily interpret the world, approach challenges, and seek solutions. And just as other spiritual disciplines require set apart times and places, right? Like carving out that early morning hour or telling your team, I'm taking vacation, or joining a virtual Bible study group. So does effective utilization of design thinking principles demand that we give it the process, the time, the space, the other allowances that it needs. So instead, let me give you an example of what I mean by that. Instead of rushing to solve a problem with a technical solution, we're going to practice adaptive leadership. Instead of assuming you know what your audience needs, we're going to take the time to organize a focus group. Instead of disallowing experimentation due to budget or scheduling demands, we're going to actively allocate the human and financial resources needed to pursue a design thinking approach. So a couple of questions for you to consider. I'd like maybe, just like John did, one or two people to unmute and share your answer to one of these questions. You can choose which one. As you reflect on the past year, where have you experienced hope, transformation, or incarnational presence in the work you do? That's for those of you who really want to go for the heady theological stuff. And then the other question that you can consider is, do you think you might already be practicing design thinking? And if so, can you offer a brief example? So anyone would like to share? It's interesting because once we start to really unpack design thinking and start to recognize it for what it is, you might realize you're actually already doing it in a lot of ways, right? Go ahead, Kara.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and then moved online. This past year, we've developed the intimacy as possible online, where everyone said it's impossible. We're creating intimate space to encounter God, and that has been very hopeful.
Yeah, that's right. That's actually an answer to both questions, Kara. So really appreciate that. Thank you for that observation. Somebody else, one more person.
Yeah, I think that space, creating that intimacy of space has also meant that we haven't been bound by geography. And so we've been able to to have relationships with people in our congregations, but also in our studies that we simply wouldn't have imagined before because of logistics. And we've also been able to hear voices that we might not have listened to before because they weren't necessarily in our neighborhood or in our churches. And so I think that that God is made present to us through those breaking down of those barriers as well.
That's absolutely right. That's great. Those are both great examples. I mean, sometimes we are proactive in our design thinking, the pursuit of design thinking, and sometimes we're reactive, and that's okay. That's still good design thinking that happens, you know, when the factors of our context change and we're forced to kind of, you know, adapt and modify what we do and how we do it. So wonderful. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing and pass it back to John.
Okay, let me share my screen this time. So thanks, Lauren, helping us understand design thinking from a spiritual perspective. After all, we are followers of Christ, and we want to make sure that what we do applies to every realm, every arena of our lives. So I want to start off with this forecast for the economy and publishing in 2021, because I want to make sure that we have the context right in which we do what we do, and we do business. And there's a report that came out recently by these three book publishing industry consultants, Cliff Guren, Ted McRoy, Steve Sick. And the title of that report is COVID-19 and Book Publishing Impacts and Insights for 2021. This is something you could easily find when you type in the title of this report. It's available for free, and you can download it if you haven't had a chance to read the report yet. So the forecast for the economy and publishing in 2021, as you see the image, is going to be pretty sunny because gross domestic product is projected to grow by 4.2% by the Federal Reserve. And then the world economy is also projected to grow by 5.2% according to the IMF. And consumer discretionary spending should rise with the economy's anticipated growth in 2021. And there's a high demand for digital technology and also the social element. As you think about the social element, all of us are somehow enforced or habituated because of this COVID-19. And because of that, we will see that there are some positive things that also have come out of this pandemic as well. You definitely spend more time with your family members, whether you like it or not. And also you see your children reading maybe more books, or even adults reading more books. And there's the $900 billion relief package. And forecast for the economy and publishing continues on this slide. According to the Wall Street Journal, there are three reasons why the US economy will take off in 2021. The first reason is new business applications have nearly doubled, and pandemic savings deposits of $2 trillion, they are waiting to be spent. And the people will continue to save time and money formerly spent on commuting. Now, how has COVID disrupted the publishing sales and supply chain? According to the report, it's less than we might imagine. And the most recent data from the Association of American Publishers and National Publishing Database shows solid gains across the most publishing sectors. And in the largest sector, trade publishing sales were up by 7.5% to October 31st, after a mere 0.4% increase in 2019 and 1.5% increase in 2018. So this pandemic definitely helped book publishing industry, as you can see the numbers. And demand for ebooks, podcasts, virtual tours will continue to increase. And the shift to work from home might be the emerging norm until it's completely safe to go back to work in person. So before I begin to address the design thinking, the concept, and the whole process, what do you think about these stats, these numbers, and this report? Does that apply to all of you, Protestant church-owned publishers, or is this something that is totally, unrelated to what you are living and what you're experiencing? Can I have a couple of volunteers to respond to that? Yes, Amy.
So I would say I'm at Menno Media, and our book imprint is Herald Press. And I think what you're reporting there and what we're reading in terms of book trends, that matches up with what we're seeing.
Okay.
In terms of congregational resource trends, that is not true whatsoever. And I see other nods there too. So I know I can't quite remember exactly what we're allowed to say in terms of sales or not, but while our book sales have gone up in COVID, our curriculum sales are in the tank because churches don't know how to do Sunday school in this particular point in time through no fault of the churches. And you look at who's teaching Sunday school in churches, let's say to children, it's typically older adults who may not want to teach electronically, or it's school teachers who are tapped out and don't want to teach kids Sunday school. And so in terms of the overall trends, I think for our organization, we see it really affecting our product lines very differently. The effects.
Right. Well, good to know. That's the kind of contextual knowledge we need to have. I need to have, actually. So can I have one more person? The proliferation of online and digital materials make finding new podcasts or ebooks harder. I see. Well, thanks for that response there.
I think another nuance to what Amy said is that depending on the kinds of books that a publisher publishes, if they are for supporting traditional congregations, for example, which is the kind of books that Judson publishes, our book sales would go down. Whereas if there were books for individuals or leadership books, which some of our books are, but it just depends on what kind of publisher you are, who you're publishing for within that market. Individuals versus congregations.
Yes, great. So all of you are very well aware of what is happening and what is working and what is not working. And this is the kind of context in which design thinking could be utilized. So let me continue.
And Milton also put in the chat too, that it depends on how adept the publisher is at using the digital marketplace.
Right. Thanks for that too. Yeah. So here, design thinking is defined by Tim Brown, CEO of IDEO, as a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. I know that is a mouthful. So simply put, design thinking is a human-centered problem-solving tool with sustainable business model. So there's that human-centered and the need and business model. So something that you come up with needs to be, desired by people. If it's not helping people, then it's not really good design thinking. Anyway, so that is the definition of design thinking. And here, briefly, The Corporate Life Cycle by Lawrence Miller in his book, Barbarians to Bureaucrats, the Corporate Life Cycle Strategies. There are things that you need to consider, right? When a company is studied, usually starts with a new technology or new insight or new knowledge or something. But as it goes through that life cycle, it gets to a point where that newness, that competitive edge is lost along the way. And the company or the corporation now focuses more on exploitation or administration or management. So unless you have a good mixture or good balance of exploration and exploitation, any company will die out at some point and focus more on administration, but eventually there will be the dying out of a company. So design thinking in 3 steps. First, inspiration. So this is the stage where you have to identify a need or a problem, right? After all, you don't want to have solutions for which there are no problems, right? You definitely want to have, a need or a problem that that you have to work with. And the second is ideation. And this is actually the most important part of the design thinking. So during this process, you will have to have your ideas turned into or translated into insights and insights into products or services that you will be implementing. So inspiration to ideation and to implementation. And this is the whole process of design thinking. So, design thinking 101, so to speak. So you start with empathize on top, empathize. So you have to empathize with the people's needs and problems, right? After all of us Christians, we need to be compassionate and we need to be sympathetic to what other people are experiencing. So like the video that we watched, the person identified with the people who had a need of having light, especially when it's pitch dark at night. So there's that need, there's that problem. And so after you empathize, which empathy is something that you have to continue to have throughout this whole process. That's why it makes design thinking so human-centered. And once you define what your need or problem is, you go on to the next stage, which is ideate. This is the stage where you generate, you develop ideas and you test ideas. And those ideas can be crazy and wild, and any kinds of ideas are possible. This is the time you could experiment with anything. You know, money is no issue. Resources are not the issue. So you have to work on generating ideas. And once you generate as many ideas as possible, as time permits, then all of the participants will vote on the best idea they think. So there will be a time when you select on an idea that everybody agrees is the best. Once that idea is identified, then what you do is you rapidly prototype that idea, right? So as you rapidly prototype that idea, you actually consider making a real and tactile and visible representation of the idea that you want to implement at the end. But then another thing that is quite important is you take this prototype, rapid prototype, to your end users. In your case, it'll be your readers or others that you are dealing with as your business partners. So as you go to your end users, you get your feedback, their feedback and their input, and then you come back and make modifications, make adjustments. So there's this iterative process that happens. As you go through several iterations, then you get to a point where you think and you believe is the solution for the need or the problem that you identify. And then is no more feedback, no more changes coming from your end users. So that's when you go public and you implement the products or the services that you came up with. So that is the process. Then as you go through that ideation process, today we'll be just focusing on one element of the entire process because we don't have that much time to go through the entire process. So as you generate ideas, what can help you is this: how might we question? We emphasize how because we don't ask why, rather we ask how. We are looking for solutions. Might means there is a possibility, it's a possible, it's something that we can do. And then the plural, we, it's not I, it's not you, but it's we do it together. It's a very democratic process, actually. You draw ideas from pretty much everybody of your organization, of your company. So people come together and they generate ideas together. And then everybody votes on the best idea everybody thinks is, not the CEO's idea or not the manager's idea, but anybody's idea that could really help the corporation, that organization. So the next one, but then we also know that we have resistances to creativity, resistances to innovation. Why do we have to bother about creativity or innovation and whatnot? And we have to acknowledge the fact that we have resistances. And Stephen Pressfield said, most of us have two lives, the life we live and the unlived life within us. Between the two stands resistance. So in an organization like yours, some of you might have this resistance also. Yes, we want to try experiment with this, but then what if it doesn't work? What if it just tanks? There's that question, which also makes you very resistant. So think about some wild ideas your organizations have, if resources are now no objects. What wild ideas, what crazy ideas you might come up with. And there's no harm, coming up with these wild ideas, right? For our purpose, for our exercise. So again, as you think about this ideation process, there are three things you also need to consider. Number one, desirability. If people don't want it, people don't desire it, once again, there's no use, right? It's not useful, and people will not use it, will not buy it. What about feasibility? It has to be feasible, technologically feasible, and it has to be viable financially. That is why I define design thinking as human-centered problem-solving tool with sustainable business model, right? Human-centered, desirable, and technologically possible, sustainable, and viability. You have to have finance, business model. So, ideal brainstorming rules. There are 7 rules, and here, defer. Sometimes when we work together, when we try to brainstorm, certain things, some people say, "Oh, that is such a stupid idea. That's not going to work." We have to defer judgment, right? And the second rule is encourage wild ideas. Tell them, hey, money is no problem. Don't worry about the resources. Right now, we are going to just generate as many ideas as possible. And stay focused on the topic. As you discuss, sometimes you know that you go somewhere else talking about other things, chasing rabbits, right? And then build on the ideas of others. We live in a society where, ours is so important. We want to have an ownership of everything, right? If somebody else has that, I don't want to have that. I want to have something else. So it's okay for you to allow others to build on your idea so that we all can come up with the best idea, because after all, we are working for the organization, not for ourselves. And then one conversation at a time, and be visual, and then go for quantity as time permits. So we actually want to give you a time. I don't think we'll have that much time. Initially, Lauren and I thought about maybe giving you 15 minutes, but I don't think we'll have that much time. So we'll give you about 10 minutes, 10 minutes. And what you do is you think about this question. The question is, how might we, a subsidiary publishing house, or you think about, fill in the blanks with your company's name, your publishing company's name, reach the markets of emerging readers, right? Whether they are adults, whether they are young adults, children who have to, who are confined to their own homes, can't do much. They have to do something. And how can we reach out to them? How can we reach out to adults? How can we reach out to the young adults? So you have 10 minutes to generate as many ideas as possible. But toward the 7-minute mark, try to vote on the ideas that people come up with, people generate. And then when we come back to report out to the big group, I want you to report that idea that everybody agreed to think that was the best idea, so that we can all see what you came up with. It's an exercise. I know it'll be messy, and design thinking is messy, by the way. So, Beth.
And to clarify, John, this is a bit of a role playing, imaginative role playing. So you're going in, and your group of 5, you're a team,
right,
who's identifying an emerging market, right?
Yes. And
coming up with these ideas for what your for what your publishing house would look like. What would it be? What's the problem it's trying to solve? Who do you need to talk to? That kind of thing. Yeah, perfect.
So I have pre-populated some breakout rooms, but I used the whole list of people who had registered, and there's a bunch who have not shown up. So some groups will be smaller than others, but here we go. So 10 minutes. All right, here they come.
Oh, quickly. So, okay, I wonder how your breakout session went. And also, as I told you earlier, what is one thing that you think you identified as maybe the best idea that you might consider implementing? Who wants to go first? No one's going. Oh, yeah, the Milton goes. All right.
Milton.
So our group was one that suffered in attendance because people didn't show up. So it was just 2 of us.
Oh, okay.
And what we talked about, the way we understood the question was trying to pick an emerging market and then talk about what we would do with it. And so what we picked was children's books, and trying to think of ways that we could promote those in non-church settings. Even though they're books about faith, in general, children's books are not so forced. I mean, they can speak to a wider audience more easily, I think. And so the idea we were sort of forming was that we would really take a more analog approach, I guess, and work on cultivating personal relationships with independent bookstore owners, probably doing it, when we start talking about feasibility, is doing it regionally, but not email, but how do we get the books in the store windows in little shops like Breakwater Books here in my town, and create analog. I mean, that seems to go against some of the, instead of trying to figure out how to get on Amazon's top list, how do we do like this grassroots thing? So that was what we were talking about.
Awesome.
And the time went very quickly.
Right, I know. There's another group, Kara and Laura and Joan, also talked about, children's books. Can one of you share?
Yeah, we did. We narrowed it down a little bit. We talk about multicultural children's books. There's a gap. We think there's a gap in the market. We didn't get past the ideation stage, but just how to go about developing those. We talked about working with teachers, Sunday school teachers, and also church groups, like our Asian churches and our Black churches and Latinx churches, to identify people who could write those books. And then also, not just adults, but also the children, to encourage children to write their own books, right. And maybe even set up a self-publishing arm for children to publish their own books. Of course, we didn't get, we weren't judging the idea here. So
right, exactly.
That was kind of exciting. And then we talked about maybe contacting art schools to recruit young artists who, becoming professionals, who may be people of color. Also working with groups like Publishing in Color, Brian Elaine's group, who are already trying to do this kind of thing, to plug into their efforts a little bit more, or working with writers that we already have. To see if they'd be, interested in writing for children. Although we identified some disasters that we've had trying to do that, because not everybody can write for children. Even though everyone that you ask about it says, "Oh, I've always wanted to write a children's book," so you have to be aware of that. And then we start talking about maybe PCPA could commit to publishing a series of children's books, and we could each take out with them.
So it's similar like the talk kind of revolves around children's books, and maybe there's a potential for children's. I mean, everybody's talking about it, so there's got to be something. Can we have just a couple more people share? I know that we are running out of time, but yes, Mark.
I'll share real quick. We had 3 people in our group. Mary brought up an experience out of her life of having a child babysitting situation where the parents had their native language, the child had some understanding of English. And so how could you do something that would help both? And she was suggesting maybe you illustrated the Christmas story and you had both languages on there to explain it. And then this also would then allow both of them to talk back and forth about what the illustration was. And so they could go on from whatever the story was that was in the 2 languages, English and something else. So.
Yes. Okay, thank you. I think there's a hand raised.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in our group, we actually talked about a different target audience, which was an intergenerational audience that as churches hopefully go back and resume some in-person meetings, that our idea of Sunday school will not be based on grade level Sunday school, but that it will probably be a more intergenerational, and how do we respond to that need. And a great idea that Amy came up with and that we kind of bounced off was the church in a box. But this type of, people are used to getting their meals in a box, and there are all these unboxing kinds of things, and that maybe what we need to do is respond to this hunger for spiritual feeding with the, kind of everything that you would need for 2 weeks in an intergenerational study. And so the approach could be using multimedia with TikTok and that type of thing, or however the approach is, but that we're giving people, it arrives on their doorstep with all the tools that they need, and there's kind of energy and excitement. So we're not sending them the whole year. We're kind of delivering it in a way that each time you get that box, you get a little bit of endorphins and excitement.
Right. It's great that there's excitement. And also we have to make sure that, these ideas will be prototyped rapidly on a small scale, not on a larger scale, because, you never know whether one thing is going to work or not, right? That's why we go to our users and see if there's this idea is something that they would desire. They would love to see it implemented. Otherwise, it's just an idea, right? Do we have one more group to report out? If not, I need to turn it over to Lauren so that we could kind of wrap it up with what we studied in the first place.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to quickly, with the seconds I have left, just bring this back up because we promised we'd revisit these questions. I'm going to leave it here with the sidebar. Hope that's not distracting. So quickly, if anyone can unmute themselves and if you have a response to one of these questions, do you think that the PCPA members should care about design thinking? What does it have to do with what we do? Have I been changed at all as a result of this organization, or is there something I can bring back to my colleagues and my team? Anybody want to respond to any of those? Please feel free.
For me, it just reminds me that our God is a creating God. And so we get stuck in the administration and the processes that we've been doing forever. And it's like, no, God is so much bigger than that. This is like a process way for Jays to be creative.
Amen to that. Yeah, I love that, Kara. Thank you.
Amen.
I would say another reason that we should resonate with this is eventually we don't have something for the people we're serving if we're not trying to come up with new ways to have products that meet the changing world that we live in. So
yes.
This process is something that is very appropriate for us as publishers.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mark.
I think one of the things that stands out to me, or that in listening to all talk, is that this begins with where the need is rather than the other end. I think a lot of times I feel like our process in publishing is top down rather than the other way, that we sit around and think about things that we think people need, but we've never actually talked to any people about it. And then we are caught by surprise when they don't know it's there, or it doesn't find anything. And so and that following trends is not the same thing as talking to people about their needs.
That's
Because
a really
those
wise distinction.
aren't the same things, and we have grassroots work to do before we start sitting around in rooms thinking of new ideas that follow trends.
Yeah, that's that incarnational piece. Very good, very good. Well, wish we could talk for another hour, but we know everyone is busy and have places to go. As I promised, John and I will send Beth our slides as well as our contact information. So if there's anything else you kind of want to just shoot the breeze about, I think John and I both love talking about this kind of stuff, and we'd be happy to make ourselves available. Oh, there you go. He's already prepared. So there's our email addresses. Feel free to shoot us an email, and we'll pass it back to you, Beth.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren and John, for your very helpful presentation. As John and I were chatting while you were in your small groups, it was a lot of material to try to pack into an hour, and you did it beautifully. And I will send out the unedited recording of this, because editing skills are not my gift and I don't have time to learn it right now. So you'll get the unedited and also the slides and with their contact information. And thank you all for participating. And if you have suggestions for other topics or other speakers for future Third Thursday webinars, I would love to hear from you. God's blessings. Thank you.
Thank you.